Have you ever wondered why some gazes pierce through you, as if they know too much about you, as if they were there even before you were born? Maybe no one has ever told you this directly, but the color of your eyes carries an ancient truth about why you came into this life to experience love. And this truth isn't found in modern manuals or in the instant self-help formulas you can find everywhere. It is written in symbols, in archetypes, and in the subtle details of your own face. It is found in the small reflections that appear when you look in the mirror, but not just to check your appearance. When you truly look at yourself, when you allow yourself to see, and not just to be seen. Carl Jung said that symbols are the language of the soul, and what could be more symbolic than your gaze, that which others touch without touching you, that which you reveal even when you try to hide? Right now, you might think that the color of your eyes is just a genetic inheritance, a random combination of pigments and chromosomes. But that's what we were told when the body was separated from the soul, when it was decided that everything we are could be reduced to science, statistics, and biological functions. But you feel that this isn't everything. It never was. Because the truth is, you weren't born with brown, green, or blue eyes by chance. Your soul chose that shade to say something. Something you came to heal, something you came to live, something you came to remember. And perhaps it is in love that this message reveals itself most clearly, because it is in love that the deepest parts of our psyche come to the surface. It is when we try to get close to someone that our light and our shadow dance most intensely, and the eyes, they are the meeting point of these two forces. Have you ever noticed how some eyes attract us in an inexplicable way? It's not just beauty, it's not just chemistry, it's as if something in them calls to us. As if they're saying, "I know that pain," or "I know what you're searching for." And maybe that's why so many people fall in love with a gaze before they know the story. Because eyes speak a language that lineage has forgotten. They speak of essence. And in today's world, where everything is filtered, where everyone is rushing and trying to present themselves, a true gaze can still stop time. But why are we so disconnected from this truth? Because we grew up hearing, "Don't judge by appearances." But no one taught us how to understand the soul behind appearances. No one taught us to listen to what the eyes say in silence. And so we ignore one of the most powerful keys to self-knowledge, the symbolic perception of our body as a reflection of the soul. The ancients knew this. In initiatory civilizations, the eyes were considered spiritual portals. Egypt, India, Greece, Tibet, all spoke of the energy of the gaze as something sacred. It wasn't superstition, it was wisdom. And this wisdom said that the color of your eyes reveals the kind of love you came to experience, and also the kind of love you came to heal. Jung would have called it an archetypal calling, because everything you feel, seek, or repeat in relationships doesn't happen by chance. These are unconscious repetitions of stories that need to be integrated. And the color of your eyes is a quiet reminder of that. Let's try an experiment. Close your eyes for a moment and try to remember someone who deeply touched you. It doesn't have to be a mutual love. It could have been an impossible love, an unfulfilled love, a gaze that stayed in your memory. Now try to recall the color of that person's eyes. Do you notice how that memory still lives within you? That's because their eyes touched something in you that had been dormant. And the most intriguing part is that perhaps the color so different from your own attracted you precisely because it carries something you lack, or something you hide. This is what Jung would have called a projection of the shadow, when we seek in another the part of ourselves we've forgotten to love. And here is one of the deepest revelations of this video. The eye color that attracts you most may be the exact opposite of your own, because it embodies the energy your soul longs to integrate. If you have light eyes, perhaps you yearn for the strength and groundedness of a dark, steady gaze that roots you. If you have dark eyes, perhaps you long for the lightness and subtle vision of someone with bright eyes that make you dream. But it's not about aesthetics. It's about the energy behind the color. It's what the subconscious perceives, even when the conscious mind doesn't yet understand. This dance of gazes between light and shadow, that's what makes love so mysterious. It's what makes you fall in love with someone who, rationally, doesn't make sense. It's what makes you feel immense pain when losing someone who perhaps wasn't in your life for very long. Because it's not about time, it's about resonance. And the eyes, with their color and vibration, are instruments of that resonance. But what about your own eyes? What do they say about you? Have you ever looked in the mirror with the intention to see yourself, rather than to evaluate yourself? It's an uncomfortable question, because most people look in the mirror searching for flaws, not for clues. Searching for imperfections, not revelations. But the eyes don't lie. They are like windows into a story your lineage may never dare to tell. And when you begin to understand the language of your eye color, whether blue, green, brown, hazel, or any other unique shade, you begin to understand your role in relationships. What pattern you came to change, what kind of love you're ready to live, and what kind you're still learning to feel worthy of. Have you ever felt like you keep attracting the same kind of relationship? Maybe the problem was never the other person. Maybe it's not about changing who you're with, but changing your gaze. Changing how you see yourself. Changing what you believe you deserve. Because all of that is imprinted in your psyche and reflected in the iris of your eyes. When Jung first wrote about archetypes, he wasn't talking about signs or personality labels. He was speaking of layers of the soul that express themselves through form, gesture, color, the body. And when he said that the body is symbolic, he was urging us to move away from a mechanical view of existence and begin noticing the miracle hidden in every detail of our own biology. And now I ask you, can you imagine what your love life might reveal if you began to interpret the light in your eyes as a map of your essence? Perhaps the answer you've been searching for all this time isn't in someone else's behavior or in unanswered messages. Perhaps the answer is in the mirror looking straight at you. From this moment on, everything you thought you knew about yourself might begin to shift. You are not just a person with brown eyes, or green, or blue. You are a soul that chose to see and to be seen through this specific lens, because this lens carries a mission, a lesson, a destiny. And in the next part of this journey, we will explore together what each color means, not in a superficial sense, but in a symbolic, spiritual, energetic way. Because your eyes have been trying to tell you something for a long time, and perhaps now you are finally ready to listen. Imagine yourself standing in front of a mirror. The house is quiet. Time outside seems to have stopped, as if the world has pressed pause so you can fully live this moment. You slowly move closer to your reflection, not to fix your hair, not to cover up your tiredness with makeup, not to pretend everything's okay. You approach because, maybe for the first time in a long time, you want to truly see yourself. And when you do, something unexpected happens. You feel a presence, a strange sense of familiarity, as if a whole story is contained in your eyes, an old story, a story you may have never even told yourself. That's what eyes are. They store, they whisper, they remember what the mind has forgotten. And if you were born with brown, green, blue, or any other uniquely colored eyes, it is not by chance. It's not just about aesthetics, it's about purity, about a vibration that resonates with what you are destined to experience, especially in love. In love, we are exposed. We can spend years crafting an image, a pose, a defense, but one right look from the wrong person, or the wrong look from the right one, is enough to make it all collapse. And who you become in those moments says far more about you than any story you've told yourself your whole life. In 2025, we are more open than ever. And yet, paradoxically, we are also more closed. Relationships have become fast, fluid, sometimes disposable. But the emptiness many feel after quick and superficial encounters is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of depth. And those who feel that emptiness, who feel like they are too much for the modern world, are usually carrying an ancient soul, a soul that longs for connections that can't be explained, but can be recognized. Perhaps that's your case. You feel that you love differently, that you notice what others overlook, that you see beauty in the small details, in shared silence, in a gentle touch, in a gaze that hesitates before opening. And it is precisely for this that you've been called too sensitive, too intense, too deep. But deep down, you know that this too much is exactly what makes your presence unforgettable to those who know how to see. And, strangely enough, this is often exactly why you fall in love with people who are not ready, people who are captivated by your soul, but frightened by its depth. People who look into your eyes and, without knowing why, realize they can no longer pretend to be superficial around you, that they will have to reveal their emotions, that they will have to look at themselves. And perhaps they are not ready for that. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever felt like you gave too much to someone who couldn't receive it? Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and saw an entire future, while that person was merely seeking a distraction from their unresolved past? These pains have deep roots, and Jung would not explain them as emotional weakness, but as the result of an imbalance of archetypes. He would say that, when entering a relationship, you activate unconscious forces that reflect unhealed wounds, old patterns, or even archetypal memories you carry within you, without even realizing it. Now look at yourself again. Think about your journey up to this point, about past relationships, about the silences that remain, and ask yourself, what were your eyes looking for in each of those encounters? What were you trying to find? Perhaps the answer lies in a language the ancients called symbolic. Because in all great spiritual traditions, the eyes were seen not only as physical instruments, but as spiritual signs. Each color carried a vibrational field, a mission, a specific form of love, and a unique way of being loved. Brown eyes, for example, are connected to the archetype of the guardian. These are people who offer safety, grounding, and presence, but they often forget themselves in order to support others. And when they fall in love, they do so with their whole being. Yet it can be hard for them to express their own needs. Blue eyes, by contrast, are considered the vision of the unseen. These are sensitive souls connected to the intuitive realm. They often love in silence, but that silence can turn into a chasm when the other person doesn't know how to interpret unspoken gestures. They are frequently idealists, dreamers. They love deeply, but can get lost in fantasies that the other person cannot keep up with. Green eyes carry the energy of transformation. People with such a gaze live in constant inner change. They are intense, passionate, ambiguous. They love with fire and fog, able to give themselves completely, then walk away without warning. They are a bridge between what is and what could be, and for that, they are often misunderstood. Then there are hazel or amber eyes, unique blends usually found in those who live between worlds, who feel everything at once but struggle to explain it in words. They are emotional chameleons who adapt to their surroundings, but long for a place where they no longer have to hide. When you begin to see all this, not as superstition, but as the symbolic language of the unconscious, something changes. You begin to understand your own patterns. You begin to realize that this curse of always attracting the same type of person actually has meaning. It is a pedagogical repetition, something your soul insists on experiencing again and again until it is finally integrated. And the color of your eyes is a mirror of that. Look closely. Maybe you are someone who, for decades, has longed to be understood. Someone who adjusted, adapted, dimmed the light in their eyes, just so it wouldn't disturb others. But now, something in you is awakening. Something is calling you to return. To remember who you were before the masks, before the filters, before the disappointments that made you promise yourself you'd never open your heart again. Perhaps this is exactly why you are here, not by chance, not out of boredom, but because your soul recognized this call, the call to reclaim the power of your gaze, to look others in the eyes, no longer asking for love, but offering your presence, to look at yourself in the mirror and instead of seeking approval, offer acceptance, to stop being a spectator of your feelings and become the main character of your own emotional story. And at this stage of the journey, you probably already feel that this path is more inward than outward, that it's not only about understanding others, but about understanding yourself. And for this, you need tools, practice, silence, method. There is a quiet language that passes through time, words, and even the body, a language that few have learned to decode, but that everyone feels on some level. And this language is the color of the eyes. Have you ever noticed how some people's gaze seems to speak even before they open their mouths? How some eyes tell stories that no one has dared to write down? Today, we will dive even deeper into this living mirror. We will touch the hidden layers of symbolism that the ancients revered, and that modernity tries to suffocate with diagnoses and classifications. Because, unlike what you've been made to believe, the color of your eyes is not just a matter of genetic inheritance, it is an energetic signature. And if you learn to listen to it, it can reveal to you recurring patterns spanning decades, inherited traumas you are unaware of, and even the kinds of love your soul desperately seeks. Have you ever noticed that there are people whose eyes radiate inexplicable calm, even when they say nothing? They seem to say everything. And others behind their gaze hides a fire, a restlessness, as if they are at war with something invisible. It's not just character, it's vibration, and this vibration is expressed even before any actions through the color, intensity, and the way a person looks at you or averts their gaze. Now pause for a moment, remember your childhood, the person who had the greatest emotional impact on you. Maybe it was your mother or father, or your grandmother who looked at you with a mixture of pain and tenderness. Try to recall the color of their eyes, were you able to? And now, try to remember what you felt when that person looked at you, what that gaze stirred in you. This memory is not trivial, it shapes us, because the first gaze we receive in life, especially the one that acknowledges or rejects us, becomes an unconscious template for future relationships. Jung would call this a visual affective complex, and many of us spend our entire lives trying to recreate, fix, or avoid the first gaze that imprinted us. That's why sometimes you fall in love with someone without understanding why it's not love, it's an attempt at healing. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever met someone, and in the first seconds felt like you knew their gaze, even if you had never seen this person before? And that recognition led you into an intense, often unbalanced, but impossible to ignore connection. This is exactly the place where we need to talk about the archetypes behind the colors. Let's do it together. Blue eyes carry the archetype of the seer. People with such eyes are naturally connected to the invisible world. They feel before they understand. They love with their whole soul, but sometimes get lost in their emotions. Their eyes reflect a sensitivity that can be both a gift and a curse. They see more than they should and suffer because of it, but they also see beauty where no one else notices. When you look into blue eyes, you can feel a coldness that doesn't come from indifference, but from the depth of a restrained emotional sea. What is the challenge for such people? To learn to express their feelings, because the world cannot read eyes as well as they read everything around them. Do you know someone like this? Or maybe it's you. Green eyes, on the other hand, are rare, and like everything rare, they carry a certain mystery. These people live with an inner motion. They are intense, transformative, almost alchemical. One moment they are full of warmth, the next distant and silent. This is not instability, this is complexity. These are people who feel everything deeply, but do not open up easily. because they know the power they carry within themselves, and they know not everyone is ready for the intensity their eyes reveal. If you have ever loved someone with green eyes, you know what I mean. It feels like you will never fully know them, and that mystery, that dance of light and shadow, is what attracts the most and challenges the most. Now take a moment to think, which of these energies is closest to yours, and which attracts you the most? Write in the comments what color your eyes are and what you think they say about you. This interaction can open a very powerful field for collective reflection. Perhaps someone with eyes completely different from yours will read what you wrote and recognize themselves in your experience, because we are all mirrors, and sometimes we need another's gaze to finally see ourselves. Brown eyes are the most common, often underestimated, but energetically they are the most grounded. These are the eyes of the earth, ancestors, quiet care. These people support, nurture, accept, but they also carry a deep pain, the pain of being forgotten, because, in a world that worships the unusual, the ordinary is dismissed. People with brown eyes often bear the emotional burden of the entire family. They are the invisible center of many homes. But behind this silence often hides immense loneliness, a desire for someone to care for them too, to see them, to acknowledge them not only for their strength but also for their vulnerability. How many times have you been strong for everyone, and no one noticed that you needed support? If you feel your brown eyes were taught not to cry, not to tremble, not to waver, perhaps it's time to allow yourself to look at yourself with greater compassion, because the strength you have always given the world is now what you need. And finally, amber, chestnut, golden eyes, they are the eyes of transition. People who live between worlds, who don't always feel like they belong. They carry traits of different colors, different characters. They are observant, yet intuitive, rational, yet deeply sensitive. They are alchemists, those who transform everything they touch, often without realizing it. Their eyes shine differently depending on the light, the moment, the emotions, and this is not only aesthetic, it is symbolic. These people came to unite, to show that love can be both strong and light, that one can be both root and wings, presence and freedom. If you have eyes of such a changeable shade, you have probably often been misunderstood, called indecisive, inconsistent, ambiguous, but in reality, you simply feel more than one world at the same time. And your mission may not be to fit in, but to show that there is more than one way to love. You understand how all of this goes beyond the physical, how the symbolism of the eyes touches layers of the soul that you may never have accessed before. And the most impressive thing is to realize how these traits directly affect your choices in love, because you don't choose the person. It's your psyche, your shadow, your emotional history that quietly recognizes in the other a chance to repeat or to heal. So if you are tired of repeating the same cycles, loving too much, giving yourself to those who don't know what to do with it, being misunderstood, perhaps it's time to change your gaze. Not the physical gaze, but the inner gaze, how you read yourself. Because as long as you keep looking at yourself through eyes of pain, you will continue to choose with eyes of trauma. Now comment here on what you learned most about yourself in this section, and which archetype describes you best. When you interact, you not only express yourself, you also awaken something in the person who is reading you. And perhaps this awakening will become the beginning of a new way of loving, more conscious, more whole, more truly yours. Because in the end, eyes don't lie, but we must learn to listen to them, and that begins right now. Imagine the following scene. You are sitting in a cafe. The day is grey, but there is something cozy in this melancholy. Opposite you sits a person, perhaps an old friend, perhaps someone you've just met, but with whom the conversation feels timeless. And suddenly, between a sip of coffee and a pause in the conversation, you notice this person's eyes not in the usual way, but you notice how they change in the light, how they reveal emotions even before they are spoken, how you involuntarily feel seen. Now be honest, how many times have you felt pierced by a gaze? This kind of experience happens more often than we think. It's not empty mysticism, it's science, psychology, energy. Recent research in neuroscience shows that eye contact activates brain areas related to empathy, intuition, and emotional processing. A study published in the journal Frontiers in Psychology showed that direct eye contact, especially between two emotionally connected people, synchronizes their brain waves by 75%. This means that biologically, we align with those who look deeply into our eyes. And here's the most interesting part. This effect is amplified when the other person's eye color differs from ours. This happens because the brain perceives the difference in shade as a signal of novelty, increasing attention and the emotional intensity of the interaction. In other words, difference hypnotizes us. But what if it's not just the brain, but the soul? Carl Jung said that what attracts us so strongly in others is actually hidden within ourselves, the shadow, the suppressed part, what we deny, forget, or fear. And the gaze, with all its symbolism and unconscious charge, becomes a means of this projection. That is why a person's look can heal or destroy. Let's take a step back, go back to your teenage years and try to remember when you first truly fell in love. It might have been at school, on the street, on a bus. Do you remember the eyes of that person? How they looked at you or ignored you? That moment shaped your emotional patterns more than any advice from your parents, because what we feel in our first loves is rarely forgotten. Moreover, we often spend our entire lives trying to revive or fix that first experience. Now think, how many times have you loved someone who reminded you of another person, not in appearance, but in the intensity of their gaze, how it made you feel? And notice how often such relationships are harder to break off, even when they are rational, as if a part of you says, there is something here I still need to understand, and almost always, there is. Jung would explain this by saying that your psyche sees in the other a mirror, not just any mirror, but a distorted one. It shows not only who you are, but also who you could be, or who you never had the courage to become. And this play between who you are and who you project is largely activated by the gaze, especially when the eye color of the other person carries an emotional purity opposite to your own. Look, brown eyes generally attract blue eyes, because they embody the stability that sensitivity lacks. Green eyes lure dark eyes, because they are the middle ground between mystery and intensity. And amber, chameleon-like eyes usually inspire admiration in anyone seeking integration. This isn't about genetic compatibility, it's about symbolic attraction. That's why some people simply break us. Have you ever met someone who shattered you with just one look, making you feel exposed despite all your emotional defenses? Probably yes. And maybe that person left. Maybe they stayed. Maybe they loved you but didn't know how to handle the depth they discovered. There is something sacred in these connections, but also something dangerous, because if the other person isn't ready to handle what they awaken in you, or you aren't ready to handle what you awaken in them, the gaze becomes a battleground. And it's at this moment that toxic relationships are born, relationships you can't leave, no matter how painful, because the connection formed is illogical, symbolic, archetypal. As if two souls activated an ancient memory that demands healing, inseparability. And here is a frightening fact. Stanford University research has shown that over 60% of people stay in relationships they consider emotionally harmful due to what they call symbolic emotional attachment. This is not ordinary emotional dependence, it's an unconscious attachment to what the other person represents. And do you know what the main trigger for this attachment is? The gaze. As if the other person's eyes say, I know your wound, and I will touch it. And the cruelest part is that often the other person isn't even aware of what they're doing. Have you ever experienced something like this? If so, please share your story. In the comments, it could be a phrase, a symbol, a name you don't have to fully reveal, but share it anyway, because your story might resonate with others. And together, perhaps, we can build a space for collective healing, even if it's silent. Now, let's return to the eyes. Imagine an ancient oracle, a temple where a priest, looking into your eyes, revealed your life's mission. This is not just a poetic image in initiatory civilizations, it was a reality. In Egypt, priests of Horus interpreted the soul through the iris of the eye. In Greece, the Pythagoreans studied the light of the gaze to determine temperament. In Tibet, monks were trained to detect soul imbalance by the shine and color of the eyes. And today we call it a cinematic technique, but perhaps cinema is life, and the eyes are windows to what you have forgotten. Once Jung said, "What you resist persists, and what you look at dissolves." Perhaps that is why some eyes scare us not because they threaten us, but because they force us to see what we avoid. Maybe you recognize yourself as someone who avoids deep gazes, who looks away when they feel red. And that's okay. Most people do this not because they don't want to connect, but because they fear what they might be forced to feel. But the paradox is that only those who allow themselves to feel can heal, and the first step toward that begins with the eyes, your eyes. Because before you look into another's eyes and ask for love, you must look into your own and ask, "Am I ready to love myself?" It seems simple, but try it now. Stand up, go to a mirror, stand quietly for 30 seconds, and just look. Don't judge, don't look away, don't try to fix yourself, just look. What do you see? If this question troubles you, it's a sign that there is a truth waiting to be acknowledged. Because the eyes are part of the body that ages the least. They change in intensity, yes, but not in essence. The child you once were still lives within them. The dreams you abandoned still reside there. And perhaps that is what another person recognizes when they love you, not who you have become, but what you have forgotten. The eyes are portals because they connect the visible with the forgotten. And if you've reached this point in the video, perhaps something inside you is ready to remember not rationally, but symbolically, not in words, but in feelings. So if you can, write in the comments what your oldest memory associated with a gaze is. Perhaps it holds the answer to something you have yet to resolve, because ultimately it's not words that imprint us the most, it's silence. And there is no silence deeper than that which exists between two gazes that recognize each other without even knowing why. There is one question many people have asked themselves for years, but never answered. Why do I love the one who hurts me? Why do I desire what destroys me? This question does not arise from the mind, it comes from a wounded heart, from a body tired of repeating cycles, from a soul that, even when exhausted, still tries to understand. Why do I keep returning to the same emotional place, even knowing it causes me pain? Perhaps until now you have considered this a weakness, but what if I told you it is a symbolic language? Carl Jung believed that what emotionally attracts us is the key to what we need to integrate within ourselves. In other words, we fall in love with what represents a part of ourselves that we have forgotten, denied, or rejected. And the stronger the attraction, the greater the potential for transformation or destruction. That is why the love we experience often doesn't make sense, because it is not rational, it is archetypal. You didn't fall in love with this person because they were perfect. You fell in love because, in some mysterious way, they had the energy your psyche needed to become whole. That doesn't mean they were your perfect match, it means they were your mirror. And mirrors don't exist to comfort, they exist to show how many times you caught yourself seeking a gaze that doesn't see you. How many times have you wanted to be noticed by someone who only looks at themselves? How many times have you changed your facial expression, your words, your body, to be accepted by someone who never truly wanted to know you? It's time to admit, perhaps you were never loved the way you deserve, because deep down, you never allowed yourself to show your true face. And here is the most important point of this whole journey. The color of your eyes not only shows what you have come to learn about love, it also shows what you have come to offer. Let's talk about this. If you have brown eyes and you constantly give yourself, care for, and support everyone, perhaps your lesson is to set boundaries, to recognize that love without reciprocity is self-denial, and that the one who carries the power of the earth also needs someone to water them, to look at them, to listen to them, because even a stone, if ignored too long, begins to crack from within. If you have blue eyes and you are used to suppressing your feelings, pretending to be indifferent so as not to scare others with your emotional depth, your mission might be to open up, communicate, teach others to read your depth, not with complicated words but with genuine presence, because the one who carries an ocean in their eyes must learn to swim, not just be a sea for others. If you have green eyes, and you have spent your life oscillating between extremes, living between passion and loneliness, between charm and the fear of being enslaved, perhaps your soul is asking for integration, not to choose a side, but to be your own balance. You don't need to stop being intense. You just need to learn not to lose yourself in that intensity. And if you have amber, brown, or indeterminate colored eyes, and have always felt you don't belong, don't fit in, moving from one world to another, perhaps it's because your mission is exactly that, to be a bridge, to create new forms of love, based not on possession, absence, or pain, but on freedom, fluidity, and deep listening. When you understand what your gaze has taught you, you stop waiting for someone else to save you. You begin to love consciously, and even more importantly, you begin to choose consciously. Because here is the harsh truth. Just because someone awakens something deep within you doesn't mean that person deserves to stay. The awakening is yours, the wound is yours, and the responsibility for healing is yours too. How many times have you confused intensity with destiny? How many times have you believed that pain is a sign of connection? How many times have you thought you couldn't live without that person, only to realize today that what held you back was not love, but attachment to the recognition they never gave you? It's hard to admit, but it's necessary, because as Jung said, what we don't accept as truth controls us like fate. It's time to change that fate, and this doesn't happen through new relationships, it happens through a new gaze, through the gaze you will now cast upon yourself. You are not what happened to you, you are what you decide to do with what happened. And if your gaze is a portal, as many spiritual traditions and psychological schools claim, then perhaps the first step is to go through that portal from the inside again, to learn to see yourself, to relearn how to love yourself, to relearn how to choose. But how do you do this in practice? That is exactly what we will talk about now, a step-by-step guide to applying all this knowledge in a living, direct, and transformative way in your daily life. A deep, emotional, and practical plan so that your love story with others, but first and foremost with yourself, is never unconscious again. Because you deserve more than repeating patterns. You deserve to see, to choose, and to live fully. You have reached this moment, and that in itself is a sign that there is something within you ready for change, not only for understanding, but for a new life. Because there is a difference between intellectual understanding and soulful integration. And today, the world needs people who not only know about Jung, archetypes, and the unconscious, but who are able to transform that knowledge into real actions, choices, and relationships. What you have heard so far is not theory. It is a call, an invitation to look yourself in the eyes and start living from within, with courage, consciously, and with true love. How to do this? How to apply everything we've talked about, the gaze, archetypes, colors, projections, and love patterns in everyday life. Not with grand promises, but through small rituals, conscious micro-decisions, and through silence that for the first time means not loneliness, but encounter. Here is a strategic plan to help you apply this transformation in your life. A 7-step path, 1 step per day or per week. The pace is yours to choose, as is the commitment. The first ritual, mirrors. Set aside 5 minutes a day to look yourself in the eyes, in the mirror, without rushing, without judgment. Simply be there with yourself, breathe deeply, observe your feelings. If tears come, let them flow. If discomfort arises, accept it. If silence comes, listen closely. Ask yourself, what are my eyes trying to tell me that my mind hasn't yet heard? The second archetypal gaze map. Identify the color of your eyes and mentally revisit the archetypes we discussed. Write down 3 qualities you recognize in yourself and 3 patterns you repeat in relationships. Then reflect on how this relates to how you were looked at as a child, what you are trying to heal through others. Turn these answers into a personal map and keep it somewhere visible. Remember, knowing yourself is the first step toward transformation. The third list of unforgotten gazes. Write the names or just symbols of 3 people whose eyes left a mark on your life. Love, pain, rejection, inspiration, no matter the reason. Next to each name, describe what you felt when that person looked at you. This will show you what kind of energy you most seek or most fear. Becoming aware of this already changes everything. The fourth, a day of the empty gaze. Throughout the day, practice full attention during encounters. When you talk to someone, look them in the eyes. Notice if there is life there, presence, or just distraction. And most importantly, notice what you offer with your own gaze. Love, fear, lack, control. This fast is not a refusal of food. It is a refusal of superficiality. It is a day without automatic responses, without autopilot answers, only present eyes, even if only your own. Fifth letter to the wounded gaze. Write a letter to your inner child, the one who was ignored, judged, silenced, or whose sparkle was overshadowed by too harsh looks. Write as if it's a reunion after a long separation. Say what he or she needed to hear. Promise that from now on, you will be the adult who looks at him or her with love. Then read this letter aloud, looking at yourself in the mirror, quietly and steadily. This is one of the most powerful rituals you can go through. Sixth, the inversion exercise. Think of a person you judge, someone who triggers strong reactions in you. Now imagine looking this person in the eyes without words. Ask yourself, what am I projecting onto them? What in them awakens something in me that is still unhealed? When you begin to see another person as a mirror, judgment dissolves into compassion. This doesn't mean allowing everything, it means stopping carrying someone else's burden. Seventh, commitment to conscious gaze. Finally, write down your commitment, a simple phrase that will serve as guidance for your next encounters, your next relationships, your next choices. For example, from today, I choose to be who I am, and I choose to see more in others than they show. Read this phrase every day until it stops being a phrase and becomes your stance. These steps are not tasks, they are portals. They don't require haste, they require presence. They don't require perfection, they require truth. And now, if something here touched you, if any passage made sense to you, reminded you of someone, or simply awakened a meaningful silence within you, please share it in the comments. You can write under any name, share your story in parts, or even write from the perspective of another person. But write, because what comes out of you heals, and what stays inside aches. And if you want to continue this journey with us, subscribe to the channel. Every video here is created with soul, intention, and truth. Like this video, share it with someone who carries a gaze you will never forget. And remember, you are much more than what the world has seen you are, what you decide to see in the future.